Good morning. Thank you everybody for coming this morning. Winners decided to come back a little bit today. I guess it's coming back this weekend too. So this morning we're fortunate enough to have Doug with Allianz here to talk with us a little bit about rising healthcare. Doug, I will turn it over to you.
Great. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Oh, wow, this is great. The group feels enthusiastic to be here to learn about Medicare and the cost of Medicare at 7:35 on a Thursday morning. One of you all can hear me all right?
Yes.
All right. Well, again, my name is Doug Zweig. I'm with Allianz. I'm excited to be here, though it is early. I am excited. It sounds strange to hear that from somebody who's 34 and wants to really talk about Medicare. But ultimately, the reason why I'm really excited is that my background is education. So I come from a teaching background, mathematics as well. So I'm a little bit of a nerd. You'll see that throughout the day. But I love to teach. I love to educate. My mom was a teacher for 35 plus years. So just thank you for coming this morning because you're allowing me to fulfill my passion. I know it sounds selfish, but I do appreciate your time. Again, my passion is educating, and you're giving me that opportunity to do that. Milton, thank you for asking me to come again. This is now my second time presenting with Milton here. First time was on Social Security. Now it's on Medicare. So Medicare is actually really important. There's a lot of important things we will talk about today. So I'm not going to spend much time kind of going through some big intro. I'm just going to jump into it here. But Medicare is important because eventually, if you're not already on Medicare, you probably will be on Medicare unless you're covered by your employer for the rest of your life, which is probably very small chance of that actually happening. So one of the things I like to always do when I start talking about anything or educating anybody about anything, is trying to start with the why. Like, why is this important? Why should we really spend some time looking at how these costs for healthcare, specifically Medicare, are going to impact me moving forward? So I'm just going to kind of draw this chart out here. So ultimately what you have here is this. Going back to 1999 through 2015, just looking at the overall increases in inflation, workers' earnings, premiums, as well as how much people are actually spending in total on their health care. So when you look at these two lower lines, all right, so this blue line here is inflation. So from 1999 through 2015, there was a 42% increase just in inflation by itself. 56% increase in workers' earnings, right? So workers' earnings did outpace inflation going back to 1999 through 2015. However, when you look at how much people were spending just on their premiums for health care, that went up by 203%. All right? Yeah, you all feel that, right? I know you all feel that because this is a real number. So a 200 plus increase on just your premiums. However, I think you all know, you spend more money on health insurance than just your premiums. So a worker's contribution to cover the entire family for all health-related services, above and beyond just premiums, was 221% increase since 1999. These costs are really going up. You're feeling it now, and it's not going to stop. So this, I think, is probably really why this is an important topic for you to understand how it impacts you today and for the next 30 to 40 years from now. Furthermore, when we actually talked with people, just like yourself, 70% said that they are worried that healthcare costs are going to, throw off their retirement plans. It's really going to throw them off track. So why is it important? It's because A, these costs are really growing, and B, you're telling us this is something that you're nervous about. This makes you worried about how you're going to live moving forward while covering your healthcare costs without having it intrude on your day-to-day life. So here's what we're going to walk through right now. All right, here's the agenda. Let's just kind of set the agenda. The first thing we're going to talk about is really just what I call the basics. Let's just understand what are your options around Medicare. So when you get to 65 years of age, what are your choices? Let's just separate the two choices you have and kind of slowly go through that. Let's just set the stage with that. From there, we're going to spend the vast majority of our time going over the cost. Now, a lot of times I say, the more you drink, the more you enjoy this presentation, but that's only around 5:30 p.m. This is a little bit too early for that. Hopefully the food makes you feel a little bit better. But we will walk through the costs, truly, of what you're going to be paying over your lifetime, down to annually, down to monthly. We'll break it down. And then we'll talk a little bit about how you can create a plan to make sure that this doesn't impede too much on your retirement. At the end of the day, it's there. There's no way of getting around it. You'll have to pay for it, but by doing some things, it could, it could possibly take some stress off of how you're going to pay for these expenses. So does that sound fair to the agenda? All right, so you all ready to do this? All right, I like this group at 7:40 in the morning. So here we go. All right, what are your options when we get to 65 years of age? I'm just, once again, just kind of throw this out here real quick. Ultimately, let's just start with this. When you turn 65 years of age, all right, when you turn 65, you must enroll in Medicare. Plain and simple. All right, when you hit 65, you've got to sign up for Medicare. If you are still working and you're still covered by a qualified plan, like your employer's plan, which most of the time those are qualified plans, you still have to sign up for Medicare, but you won't be paying for Medicare. All right, I just want to make that very clear. Because if you don't enroll at 65, even if you don't need it, there will be a lifetime penalty assessed to your Part B premiums. You don't want that. So I just want to make that clear. At 65 years of age, you enroll in Medicare. When you actually need Medicare, when you actually have to go on to Medicare, start paying for it, you ultimately have two options to choose from. All right, you have original Medicare, or you have Medicare Advantage plans. So let's just spend some time talking about original Medicare really quickly. All right? So under,
I'm sorry to interrupt, but you said when you turn 65, you're required to sign up for Medicare. Is there a range, like you have to sign up 30 days before, 30 days after, before you hit the
so basically, look at it like 60 days pre and 60 days post your birthday.
Okay, so that's the range, 60 pre and 60.
Yes.
But he's going to talk about Medicare Part B. Medicare Part B, you have a 6-month window to sign up for Medicare Part B. If you don't sign up during that 6-month window, there could be a potential that you're not underwritten for it, or your premium may be significantly higher. So Part B, that's when you can talk, if you're not employed anymore, employer's not working that for you, you're having a Medicare Part B, you have a 6-month window. I had a client that went through this, we just went through this situation, he turned 65 in June, right? Signed up for Medicare Part A. At the time he had insurance, didn't think he needed to sign up for Part B, but he had regular insurance, not Medicare supplemental insurance for it. They called me and said, we have this letter, we're not quite sure what it means. So we'll come in, we'll take a look at it. When we looked at the letter basically said that they were going through an underwriting process on him to make sure that he would qualify because he was now 10 days past his date to get the 6-month window. Okay? So it's important, if you know anybody that's signing up for Medicare Part A, typically it's 3 months ahead of time that you just sign up for it. It's secondary to an employer's plan if you're still employed at that point in time. But if you're signing up for anybody on Medicare Part B and they say, oh, I'll just put it off, it's not a big deal, I'll just put it off. They can put it off, but just know there's two things that could potentially happen. A, there could be additional penalties that go along with it, and B could be that they may not get the coverage that they want. Okay? I didn't mean to.
No, please. So, yes.
Is that for veterans also? Because from my understanding, that for veterans, they don't need the Part B?
So for veterans, it depends on the veteran. Maybe, we want to go to that one?
Yeah. So the question was about veterans benefits. Veterans benefits, if you're going to use veterans benefits, if you know somebody is, you're then tied into using the VA hospital and VA only. Right? Unless it's an emergency where you go to an emergency room situation at work. So you could be potentially limiting your options as to where you can go at that point in time when you want or need service or that work, right? Okay?
So what happens if you're out of town though?
Let's say an emergency situation. Right. So an emergency situation, they don't penalize you that for it, veterans benefits will cover it. But as soon as you are able, they will move you out of that hospital to a VA hospital.
When you say sign up, who are you signing up with?
I'm sorry?
You said sign up at 65, who are you signing up with?
Medicare.gov. You can do it at the local Social Security office, or you can do it online at Medicare.gov. And just so you all understand, when I say you have to sign up for Medicare at 65, if you're qualified by an employer still, like covered by an employer, I should say, I've seen what this form looks like when you sign up. There's a question that asks, do you want or need, I don't exactly remember the phrasing, but it's pretty much asking, do you want to decline Part B? Right, because you're covered by a qualified plan. You just say, yes, I want to decline Part B. That still gets you Part A as a supplement to your employer's plan, and you're not yet paying for Part B. Once you are no longer covered, you then have that period of time that you gotta get back enrolled into Medicare with Part B and start paying for it. But here's the breakdown, just so you all understand. With original Medicare, all right, Part A is hospital insurance. It's like 24/7 care. You have, spend some time in a hospital for surgeries, whatever it might be. That's where Part A comes into play. Now, there is no monthly cost of Part A, but when you need Part A, you could potentially be paying for it, right? Through deductibles and co-payments, depending on what it is that you're using Part A for, and what kind of Medigap coverage you have, and I'll talk about that here in a minute. But just note, no monthly premium for Part A, but when you need Part A, you're gonna be paying something. Part B, under original Medicare, that's your doctor's coverage, right? When you go to your doctor for annual physicals and so forth, that's what Part B really covers. There is a monthly premium for Part B. Part D is your prescription drug coverage. I think that's pretty self-explanatory. There is a monthly premium for Part D as well. And then you get a Medigap policy, which these are like gold. I will spend some time talking about these here in a little bit. But you gotta get a Medigap policy because there's gonna be gaps in what A and B and D cover. That's where Medigap comes into play. It starts to pick up those, it starts to cover those gaps that Medicare brings to the table. So that's original Medicare, all right? Part A, B, D, and a Medigap policy. All right, 70% of Americans, they are on original Medicare. When it comes down to the cost structure of original Medicare, for the most part, it is black and white. And I will spend time breaking down what those costs are. But you also have another option, which is these Advantage plans. It's a Part C plan. How many people here have heard of Advantage plans before? Okay, on TV, right? You got it. They advertise a lot, especially around the open enrollment period. So ultimately, it's very hard for me to understand exactly what your Medicare Advantage plan options are, because it does determine, or it's based on where you live, right? So when I go to Peoria, they have a different type of Advantage plan offerings than you folks here. But just so you know, if you go the Advantage plan route, what you're doing is you're pretty much choosing between an HMO or a PPO, like an all-encompassing plan in which everything is done within the network. From a cost structure, all right, if you go with the Advantage plan, you're still going to be paying your Part B premium, because what Part C is, it's really a combination plan of Part A, B, most of them have D, and that's it. All right, so let me just kind of walk through this with the Advantage plan. You're going to be paying your Part B premium. All right, most of these Advantage plans also have Part D covered, so you won't be paying for a Part D plan. But after you pay your Part B premium, you'll then pay a premium for the actual Advantage plan that you choose, right? And that cost can be anywhere from as low as $0 a month to as high as $140 a month. So if you really are looking to control your costs, right, you want to keep your monthly costs as low as possible, the Advantage plans can help you do that. But just note, just because it looks very cost efficient on paper, that doesn't mean the cost won't add up over time. Because one of the differences is that if you go onto, say, an Advantage plan, every time you go to the doctor, right, there's going to be a copayment. Whatever the doctor chooses to do with you, there's going to be co-payments for that as well. Right? I'm not going to say they nickel and dime you. I'm not going to use that term because I don't think that's a fair term. The rules are what they are, right? Just know, on a monthly basis, you can keep your costs really low. If you're really healthy and you don't foresee yourselves going to the doctor very often, maybe the Advantage plan could be a good option for you. And you can go back and forth every year between original Medicare and these Advantage plans. All right?
I got a question.
Yes, ma'am.
If you get on an Advantage plan, you're not on regular Medicare, and you can't get back when you want to get back, then they can raise that price.
You mean if you go back to original Medicare, they'll raise the price? So that could very well happen. Now, just so you know, if you go onto an Advantage plan, and sometime down the road, you feel like maybe it's better for you to be on original Medicare,
Santa Fe.
when open enrollment happens, you can change your plan for the next year's coverage. You can go back to original Medicare. However, you will be going back to original Medicare at the new rates. So you're 65 years of age today, and I'm just gonna make up numbers, right? If original Medicare would cost you, just making up numbers, say $100 a month, but you decide to go with the Advantage plan. 5 years later, you say, you know what, I'm gonna go back to original Medicare now. Well, maybe the new rates are $130 a month. You're gonna be going back at $130 a month. So yeah, the rates could be higher if you choose to go back to original Medicare at a later date. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. So ultimately, just keep that in mind. When you get to a Medicare age, you have to go on to Medicare. You got two options. You got original Medicare or you have Advantage plans. Speak to somebody that really can help you understand what your Advantage plan options are in your area to help you make the best decision for yourself. But with that, what I'm now going to do is spend some time really talking about the costs. Because ultimately, your options are what they are. You got two of them. What really is going to impact you truly is going to be, what is this going to cost you out of pocket over your lifetime to annually to monthly? All right, and when you look at these costs, now I know these numbers can be pretty extreme, all right? But right now, the average 65-year-old married couple that lives to their probability of life expectancy, that would be the male living to age 87, the female living to age 89. All right? When you look at what they're projected to pay in total for their health care expenses, it is $377,000. Yeah, that's a lot of money that you're expected to pay over your lifetime just for your health insurance costs. Now, that $377 to me is a very large and moving number, right? Because if you're very healthy, you know, maybe that number comes down, right? Because you're very healthy. But then again, if you're very healthy, maybe you live longer, so maybe that number goes up. And if you're very unhealthy, maybe you don't live as long, so maybe that number goes down. But then again, if you're really unhealthy, maybe you have a lot of health service needs, so maybe that cost goes up. That is a moving number. I like to focus on this number here. I know not all of you can see it, but what I'm showing you here is that they're projecting you're going to be paying total out of pocket $377,000. But this number here that I like better, it's $288,000. All right, because that is your premiums, right? So over your lifetime, right, as a 65-year-old couple, they are saying we're projecting in just your premiums alone, you will pay about $288,000. That's a guaranteed expense, right? You got to pay that every single month. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to break down how that 288 number comes to be. Because if I were planning for my Medicare expenses, that number of 377 is hard to plan for. But 288, I can plan for that because that number is very black and white. There's not a lot of gray there. So here's how it works. All right, this is original Medicare. So like I said before, Part A, there's no expense. There's no monthly expense for Part A. When you need Part A, like I said, you'll pay for Part A. Part B, there is a monthly expense for Part B. And it's means tested, which simply means the more income you make, the more you pay. Here's what they do. You turn 65 years of age, you enroll in Medicare, and let's just say you have to go on to Medicare. What they do to assess where your income is to determine where you fall in these grids here, they always look back 2 years. So when I turn 65, they say, all right, Doug, what'd you make at 63? What, based on your, say if I was married, your joint tax return, that's what determines where I fall for my 65 premiums. When I turn 66, they say, all right, Doug, what was your income at 64? When I turn 67, they say, what was your income at 65? So it's always that 2-year look back to determine what your premiums will be for that year. Does that make sense so far? Okay,
But
good.
that's a good thing, right? Because you make more as you age, and so
So it
going 2
could be.
years back.
So two points on that. First is if you are turning 65 and you're going on Medicare, they will essentially look at what your wages were at 63 at that point in time. If you are not going to continue to work, so if you are retired and you say, I'm just all I'm going to get is Social Security and pension or whatever else when I pay for it, you need to make sure that you tell Medicare when you apply
that you are retired. And that that your income is not going to be what it was when you were 63. And the magic number right now is 85,000 for a single person, 170,000 for a married couple filing joint. If you're a single person and you made, say, $70,000, it's not much of an issue when you were 2 years younger. If you made $100,000, then it is, because now you just increase your cost. And if your income is now going to be less than 85,000 going forward, then you need to make sure that you inform Medicare of where your costs are going to be, because they can potentially change what your premium is. So it's important to make sure that you make them aware of that. So let's just kind of walk through this here, all right? I turned 65 years of age. I retired, right? They're gonna look back 2 years to 63 and say, all right, what did you make at 63? If I were single, if I had made less than $85,000 2 years prior, I would be in that lowest tier. I would be paying the lowest possible premium for Part B. If I were married, if I made less than $170,000 2 years ago, I would once again be in that lowest tier. So if you're married, this is just my opinion, based on where I travel throughout Illinois, up to $170,000, that's a lot of income, right? So it kind of gives some people a lot of wiggle room. Where if you're single, $85,000, some people, they made more than $85,000. And the problem is, so when you say when you mentioned it's a good thing they look back 2 years, maybe. And the reason why I say maybe is because of this. What if you were single and you made $100,000 a year of income, and then when you retire, you realize with Milton that you only need $60,000 a year of income to really kind of get, fill the needs that you have. Unfortunately, unless you really have like a hardship event to a degree, basically you got an inheritance, or you sold a business that kind of jumped your income up, they don't always change what your premium will be. So when I turned 65, they're looking back to my age 63 and saying, all right, Doug, you made $100,000. We're going to charge you at that $100,000 rate. I would be paying $187 a month for my Part B premium. Had I made less than $85,000, I would only have been paying $134 a month. So what I'm going to say here is really important. Have a plan. When you know you're about 2 years out from Medicare age, sit down with Milton. Just say, hey, Milton, here's my income. Let's look at these bands for Medicare. Am I coming close to crossing over to a higher band? If the answer is yes, are there things you can do to reduce your income to get to that lower tier, so when you retire, you're paying premiums based on the income you'll have when you retire, not based on what your working income was. Does that make sense? All right, so again, if you make less than $85,000 or $170,000 if you're married, you will fall in that lowest possible tier. You will be paying $134 a month for your Part B premium. Now, I want to walk you through a couple things. In 2015, the Part B premium was $104 a month. In 2016, it went to $121 a month. And just so you know, the vast majority of people on Medicare from 2015 to 16, there was no increase in their monthly premium. So they're paying the same amount. For new enrollees, it went up to $121 a month. From 2016 to 17, $121 went to $134. So in 2 years, you saw about a 30% increase in premiums for new enrollees. And once again, for those that were on Medicare from 2016 to 17, they saw a very small increase in their monthly premium for Part B. Now here we are in 2018. Ready for this? New enrollee rates stayed the exact same. So if you enrolled in 2017 and you're in that lowest tier, you're paying $134 a month. If you enrolled in 2018, lowest tier, you're paying $134 a month. So for new enrollees, they didn't increase premiums. But for everyone that's on Medicare, they all got a nice increase in their premiums. It's a balancing act that they're doing here. Your costs are going up. So at the end of the day, $134 a month, let's just call it, would be your Part B premium. All right? That's what you're paying every month. Now, I like this slide. Right? They made some changes to this grid here, just so you all know. They made changes to the higher tiers. All right? That go into effect this year. I just want you all to be aware, which is why I think it's important to always have those conversations with Milton, not every 2 years, but every 6 months to every year at least, about where you're at, because in the next coming years, whether it's 3 years from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, I don't know. But at some point, they're probably gonna change up the tiers, right? Where it won't take up to $170,000 for a married couple to stay in that lowest tier. That's probably gonna come down, right? It won't take up to $85,000 for a single individual to stay in that lowest tier. That will probably come down. They need more revenue. So just keep that in mind. With that Part D, right? We talked about Part B. Let's talk about Part D now. All right. Part D is your prescription drug coverage. It's means tested as well, to a degree. All right. If you're in this lowest tier, though, right? If you make less than $170,000 or less than $85,000, you're single. What you pay for your Part D premium is simply the premium that the plan charges, and that's it. All right, just the plan premium is what you'd be paying. But once you start to make more income, you're going to be paying the premium for the plan, and then the government tacks on another charge on top of that. Right? So if I made between $85,000 and $107,000 and I was single, I'd be paying the premium for my plan plus $13.30. That would be my total monthly cost for Part D. Right? So it is means tested, but if you stay in that lowest tier, you're simply paying the premium for the plan that you chose. And I believe the average plan it cost in at least 2017 was about $35 a month. Now, that's the average. And you're right, a lot of times if you need prescription drugs, you're going to be paying more than that to cover those drugs. I think Milton kind of talked a little bit about the Medigap policies and the importance of being on top of when you enroll in Medicare. So Medigap, all right? This is very important, all right? The average national cost for a Medigap policy is $197 for your Plan F plan. But that ranges really between $120 to $450, right? So you can find a much lower cost than $197. I'm going to use $197, but there's a few things I want to point out here. Number one is this. Milton talked about that 6-month window. This is very important because when it comes down to your Medigap policy, when it's time for you to enroll, you have a 6-month guaranteed insurability window, right? Let's just say there's 10 companies offering Medigap policies in the state of Illinois. If you enroll and sign up for any of these Medigap policies by any of these companies during that 6-month window, you are guaranteed coverage without underwriting whatsoever, period. So you can go to any of the companies that you feel comfortable with and sign up with them. However, once you're beyond that 6-month window, whether it's 30 days, 80 days, or 10 days, as Milton mentioned, they can then force you to go through underwriting. And basically, if they don't want you, they'll come back with a cost that's extremely high, and you have to find a different plan to go with. So it's very important that during that 6-month window, you do enroll in your Medigap policy. Also, Plan F is the most important, is the most used one, and that's because it covers everything that Medicare doesn't cover from $1. In 2020, though, it's going away. Plan Fs are going away for new enrollees. So if you're already on Medicare, and you got a Plan F plan, or by 2020 you will be enrolled in Medicare, you are grandfathered in, you'll always have Plan F. However, if you enroll after 2020, Plan F won't be an option. The next best plan or best option from what I've gathered would be Plan G. Just note, what Plan F covers is a deductible that Part B has. All right, there is a deductible for Part B, just so you all know. It's $183 in a year. However, if you have a Plan F plan, it covers that. Plan G plans do not. Why I'm bringing this up is because what you probably could guess is that come 2020 and beyond, for those new enrollees that have to go with the Plan G plan, that Part B deductible is going to be going up. Government needs more revenue to come in. This is one way they can do it. So $197, though, at the end of the day is the national average for your plan, for your Medigap policy. I'm going to use that. So when we really break down your costs, all right, this is the important part here. Here's the takeaway. You're not paying anything on a monthly basis for Part A. Your Part B cost is $134 a month. The average Part D cost in 2017 is $34 a month, and the average Medigap policy in 2016 was $197. When you add those three numbers up, your monthly out-of-pocket cost is $365. That's what you have to pay, guaranteed, every single month for the rest of your life. Now, I've done this talk many times, and a lot of times I get someone to say, well, Social Security is covering some of this. I mean, you're right. A lot of times people have their Part B premium deducted automatically out of their Social Security paycheck. But you're still, that's still your money, right? That you would no longer have because it's going to this expense. So Social Security doesn't cover it. You cover it. You just chose to have it come out of your Social Security paycheck. Now, also keep this in mind. When you look at $365 and you multiply that by 12, that gets to $4,386 for the year. As an individual, right? If you're married, you gotta times that by 2. As a married couple, you're not paying $4,300, you're paying about $8,700. Are you all with me so far? Okay. Now, that's just for your premiums. One thing that this does not cover are deductibles, co-payments, dental, vision, hearing. This is just your monthly premiums. That's all I'm referring to here. When you actually have health service needs come up, there's probably going to be some extra costs that are associated with that. It's not baked into these numbers. And just as an example, in 2017, if you look at Part D, all right, you got a $34 a month monthly cost. So you're paying that every month no matter what. However, there was a $400 deductible that you had to hit before the Part D insurance kicked in. So if you have prescription drugs, you can bet you're paying $34 a month, and you're paying that $400 deductible. So that's adding once again to this cost. So it's going to be $400 higher, right? And then there's a donor hole provision. I won't get into all that, but I'm telling you, if you need if you have health service needs, you're going to be paying more than just the monthly cost. But here's the math here, all right? I talked about that $288,000 number, right? If you are the 65-year-old couple, living to the life expectancy from a probability perspective, that's age 87 and age 89. 87 for the male, 89 for the female. That's 22 and a half years on average that they lived and paid for health insurance costs. If you take $8,700, this $8,772 number, and you multiply that by 22 and a half years with a small inflationary rate, that's how that 288 comes to be. That's not a made-up number. Again, take $8,772 over the next 22 and a half years at a small inflationary rate. That's where you get to $288,000. And the challenge is this. Your COLAs on Social Security the last 30 years are at 2.6. By the way, if I showed you what your COLAs would have been, up until 10 years ago, that would have been 3.5. Yeah, the last 10 years, it brings it down to 2.6. All right? I would bet in the next 10 years that 2.6 will come down as well. All right? I would not expect a 2.5 to 3.5% COLA on your Social Security benefits, yet your monthly Part B costs or your annual Part B costs are going up by over 6% per year. All right, I'm not trying to freak you all out here. This is just math. This is just numbers. All right. Not that I'm not going to spend any time going over this, but if you happen to end up in a nursing home or you need an assisted living community to help you, the average cost of a private room right now is $92,000. All right, that's obnoxious. I get that, but that's the realities of where we're at today. All right, you don't want to have these types of costs erode your retirement dreams. So when we talk about developing a strategy, all right, what are we really aiming to do here? All right, yes, we know that, hey, if we're the average 65-year-old couple right now over our lifetime, we'll be spending about $377 in total on healthcare expenses. But what can I do right now to kind of take this stress off of my plate, and just maybe in a little bit. It doesn't have to be all of it, but some of it. Because again, I can't give you a magic bullet, nor can Milton. He can't provide you with something that's going to avoid all these costs. You have to pay for these. So I'll give you a couple ideas. Maybe Milton's that good. I don't know. So here's a few ideas I have for you. And I believe in planning. I truly believe in planning, just as Milton does. So one thing I would tell you is, and I don't want to come off like I'm telling you to do this, but every 3 to 6 months, you know, when you're a couple years out from retirement or you're in retirement, every 3 to 6 months I would have a plan to communicate with Milton just about where you're at from an income perspective. Make sure your taxable income isn't getting out of control. Right? When you get to age 70.5, what does the government make you do? You got it. Now, listen, at the end of the day, we want to have nice values in our IRAs. We want that. Right? We want to have a lot of money. However, if you didn't do a great job planning on how to use your monies, when you get to 70.5, when you start pulling your RMDs, that's just increasing your taxable income. So if you didn't do a good job planning on how to use your IRA appropriately, when you start taking out your RMDs, if you didn't plan appropriately, you could probably bet that 85% of your Social Security benefits will also be included in what's considered income in that given year.
What's RMD?
It's a required minimum distribution. So if you think about your IRA, like your 401k, maybe if you have one, when you 403b, when you retire, you probably roll that over to an IRA. It's the same kind of an account. When you get to 7.5, the government forces you to start taking money out. Right?
Because they don't want to keep paying interest on it?
They don't. Well, they want to basically start collecting taxes.
Oh.
Right? Because when it's in the 403b or your IRA, you're not paying any taxes yet. Right? So the government wants their money. So they're going to start making you. They force you to start pulling money out. So when you think about this, if you didn't do a good job planning, when you start pulling out those RMDs, all of a sudden your income might hit tax brackets that you never dreamed about hitting in retirement. All right? So now you're paying more in taxes. And then maybe what can happen, which would be really, I think, devastating, is that you crossed over one of these bands and now you're going to be paying more for your health insurance premiums. You're paying more in taxes, you're paying more in health insurance premiums, just because you didn't talk with Milton about how is the most efficient way for us to use what we've got. All right, so have a plan. Stay in communication with Milton. The next idea I'll give you is this. And I did this with my aunt. My aunt, a couple of years ago, she was 60 years of age. She's now 62. My aunt, she's single. She lives in Arizona. She's got a very simplistic life. She doesn't travel all that much. She's a teacher. She'll have a pension. When she gets to 65, she's going to retire, go into Medicare. And her expenses, I think Milton might use this term, plan for liabilities, right? What are your liabilities in retirement? Let's make sure those costs, those liabilities, you don't have to worry about. So I took a very similar approach with my aunt. Her name's my Aunt Sharon. I love her. All right? We kind of looked at what are her expenses going to be when she retires. They weren't that much in terms of what she has to pay every single month in costs. But one of the biggest costs was her Medicare premiums. So what we did 2 years ago, we were able to use a tool that she was able to put some money into. That in 5 years, when she turned 65, she'd actually be able to turn it on. Turn on this tool that would start providing her income. And it's guaranteed income, all right, for the rest of her life. But the amount that we put in was the right amount that in 5 years, when she turned it on, will generate about $4,400 a year of income. About $365 a month. Just to cover the costs of her Medicare premiums. It was a pension that she was able to buy that was a healthcare pension. And all it did was cover her premiums for the rest of her life. So she knows when she turns 65, she's going to turn this pension on, and her premiums are now covered. And more importantly, and this is something that I would stress, is that pension income can grow over time. Think about all the income sources you'll have in retirement. If they're not going to be able to grow over time, you got to start thinking about other ways to add income that will grow, because this cost is growing and growing by a lot.
So it sounds like a mini endowment.
Yeah,
Individual endowment.
it's exactly very similar.
That's a tool, and that's something.
Milton Milton has,
There's all different strategies.
that's just one. I don't know if that makes sense. That makes sense for my aunt, given her, like I said, her lifestyle, where she's at in her life. Right? She doesn't travel very often. She has the funds to do this. It didn't jeopardize liquidity down the road. There are things you have to look at. But at the same time, if it's not this, there could be other things you can do to set yourself up to make sure that these expenses, to some degree, are covered. So with that, that really concludes what I have to talk about, but in summary, real quick. All right, we first talked about a little bit why this is important. Why is this important? Is because this is the guaranteed expense you'll have for the rest of your life. Me as well, right? And these costs are growing, we should plan for it. But ultimately, you do have two options. You got original Medicare and Advantage plans, right? That's it. Don't be confused like you got all these, you got two. Original Medicare, with the Medi-Cal policy, or Advantage plan. Talk to somebody that you trust to help you understand which of those two makes the most sense for you. My experience, original Medicare seems to be a little bit more robust. Then, your costs. We spent some time talking about those costs. Ultimately, I'm not going to say it's $288,000. It's going to cost you about $365 a month in today's dollars. $365 a month out of pocket is what it will cost you. How are you going to cover those costs, right? And that's kind of like the last thing we talked about. Have a plan, have a strategy. There are things you can do to make this a lot less stressful for you down the road. With that, thank you so much for giving me time, Milton. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Doug. Appreciate it. To follow up on a couple of points that Doug had. First is that if you were on Social Security this year, you saw an increase in Social Security, right? It was like a 2% increase. How much of that actually hit your Social Security paycheck? Right? It was about, I think on average it was about $5. Right? That actually hit. So why is that the case? If you got this 2% increase, why did only $5, so to speak, hit your account? And that's because inside Medicare, there is what's called a hold harmless provision. The hold harmless provision says they cannot increase your Medicare premium for Part B more than what your Social Security received. So if you had a 2% increase in Social Security, you essentially saw a 2% increase in your Medicare premium. So here's the kicker. When you pay your taxes, assuming you pay taxes on Social Security, if you pay taxes on the $5, you pay taxes on, let's say, the $20 that you receive. You pay taxes on 20, right? So after you pay your taxes on 5, you may have netted 3. Right? So $3 might get you, a month might get you another, I don't know, cup of coffee. You don't even get your cup of coffee at Starbucks, I don't think, so, right? I don't go to Starbucks, I don't know. So when you think of mandatory expenses, mandatory. What's mandatory? You have to do it. You don't have a choice. Mandatory expenses, right? If you own a home, you basically have 2 mandatory expenses in retirement, right? Your Medicare is not a choice. Medicare is a mandatory expense. Did you know that if you don't sign up for your Medicare premium, and take the premium, that at a point in time they could assess your errors to repay all of the dollars that you didn't take? If you don't take your Medicare Part B and sign up for it like you're supposed to, you say, I don't need it, I'm not going to take it, whatever. There is a law, they're repealing it, starting to trade it back now, but right now, if you don't take it, over the years that you didn't take it, they could potentially have your heirs pay that back from your assets. Okay? So, does anybody know how long Medicare is solvent to? About 2026, so you got a few years. So,
That's the first next week.
so when Doug was talking about increases in Medicare premiums and then for it, right? Why do you think those premiums are there? Those increases come along. They're trying to keep Medicare solvent, right? So everybody says, there's a big debate on socialized medicine. Everybody should have socialized medicine. It's all great. They run out of money, and right now it's planning on running out of money in about 8 years, right? So how great is it that, I guess if you're not here after 8 years, it's okay, but if you're here after 8 years, it's not a good deal at that point, right? So you have certain things. Another part, when Doug was talking about the income portion for the premiums in that for it, a lot of people say, well, on municipal bonds, you don't pay federal income tax on municipal bonds, you pay state but not federal, right? Say, that's great, that won't count toward my income when I file for my Medicare in that for it. Absolutely not. If you have municipal bond income for it, what they do is you don't have to pay federal taxes, but they count it towards your Medicare income. So let's say you had $10,000, $10,000 worth of, you were making, let's say, $75,000 a year, you had $10,000 non-taxable federal income, say, great, I'm below the $85,000, I don't have to worry about it. Well, up until you turn Medicare, all of a sudden that's great, yeah, you don't have to pay federal tax on it, but guess what, that $10,000 that you made in municipal bonds, we're gonna pull it back into your Medicare income, so now you made, let's say, $86,000. Right? So now you moved up to the higher bracket. I just went through this conversation with my brother yesterday. He's going to be turning 65 in June. And we started laying out his plan. I said, I have one number that we need to make sure you stay below, and it's below $85,000. Because as soon as you get over $85,000, then you have ways to do it. There are other ways to potentially have income come in, but not have it show up as a taxable event or a Medicare expense. If you have non-qualified annuities and you annuitize those or have a quasi-annuitization for it, it's paid out principal and interest, right? At this point in time, the government doesn't tax your principal twice, right? So you only have income on whatever the interest would be, which could mean that you now, from a Medicare standpoint, have reduced your income, but your income still may be the same. That makes sense? Okay. So there are different strategies that you have to look at when you're starting to look at how do you apply for this, right? Doug talked about the band, 85,000 right now, right? That band is most likely going to come down, right? So people who are in their 50s that are planning to retire at 65, that $134 a month, if it stays on the projected area that it's at, could be well over $200 a month just for the Medicare Part B. And I'll have to kind of have a discussion with Doug because about Medicare Part A and that you're not paying for it. You did pay for it. When each month, each paycheck, when you got paid, they took out for Medicare, right? They just didn't say, oh, Medicare, you'll get that money back. Last time I checked, right? So that went toward your Medicare premium. So I'll kind of have a defer with them on that. And you did pay for it. You just didn't pay for it. You're just not paying for it, so to speak, today, right? You paid for it over the 20, 30, 40 years or whatever that you worked, right? So you did pay for it. They take 1.45% out of your paycheck every pay period right now to cover Medicare. So you paid for it, right? You're just not paying for it today, right? So the big print give it, the small print take it away, right? So when you look at consider your mandatory expenses, Medicare is a mandatory expense. If you have property, you've got property taxes are a mandatory expense, right? I guess you don't have to, but at some point I have to foreclose on the property, I guess. So that probably would not be a good thing at that point, right? One of the keys just to start to talk about in the Medicare Part B is that if you're seeing that new existing enrollees are not having the increases, the new enrollees are going to be the ones that continue to have the increases for, right? And essentially what is happening is the new enrollees are subsidizing the current enrollees, right? Because if 134 is, so to speak, the number, I don't know, haven't done the math, don't know the insurance numbers on it, but if 134 is the number, then shouldn't everybody be at, so to speak, 134, right? So they gradually do that because, again, when they increase, you get your COLA increases. They take a portion of that, goes over to Medicare, and all of a sudden you have your Medicare premiums go up, right? So they didn't really have any increases. And right now, one of the biggest and most expensive areas in inflation are those people over age 65. When they talk about general inflation, and they say, excuse me, it's running about 2% or so for it, that's for people basically under age 65. Because when you get over age 65, all of a sudden you get into all of these costs associated with Doug was referring to with regard to medical expenses, right? And the inflation rate, I think it was 6%, 6.6 or something, I think you were showing at the increase for it. That's more than 2 last time I checked, right? So if you're continuing to have those expenses, the question then becomes, how do I take assets that I have to potentially generate more cash flow that can help cover some of these expenses? Doug set it up a certain way with his aunt, and therefore there may be other ways to do it, because last time I checked, property taxes went up, right? You know, my auto insurance went up, right? Expenses continue to go up, and if you are not having corresponding inflationary increases in your retirement income, excuse me, at that point, then how are you able to keep up with the expenses that you have? So, excuse me, maybe looking at assets that you have that are not necessarily earning very much right now, and from a strategic standpoint, potentially repositioning those into assets that may be able to potentially generate more cash flow, all the while keeping in mind potentially 85 or 170 depending on your numbers, okay? Now, the key also starts to look at if you are married and your spouse passes, they're gonna look at how you filed the year before. And yes, while that might be a qualifying event, it may or may not reduce your Medicare Part B premium that following year. That's something you need to, if that situation ever would occur, you need to have the conversation with Medicare. All right, because if you don't, you could potentially be looking at increasing your costs, and statistically, if a spouse passes, it's not a 50% loss in expenses. Statistically, it's about a 20% decrease in the expenses. Yeah.
It's a life-changing event.
Correct. It's a life-changing event, therefore, but it depends on how you filed your taxes. Right? So if they look back 2 years and if you file taxes, because remember, they don't know what you're getting each month, right? They only know what you're receiving once you file your taxes, right? Then they can, it's easier. They go out, they got the IRS, they go, okay, we're gonna pull up, you know, this tax return. They pull it up and they can see what the income was on that tax return and where the income was generated from, right? Okay? So that's why it's 2 years behind, because they're looking at 2 year prior tax returns. You haven't filed 2017 taxes yet, right? So if you were signed up for Medicare now, how would they know what you made in 2017? They wouldn't, right? But they would know what you made in 2015 or 2016, right? Because you had filed your tax return. So it's just something to get.
You're on the road with me, you always get inundated all these commercials about different companies offering. Is that much different?
So the question is, around enrollment period, you get all these ads on TV that say, you know, go to Aetna or go to Blue Cross. The one thing that the government did do that was smart, they don't do a lot of things that are smart, the one that they did was for the Medicare Medigap programs that Doug referred to on your report are the same. A is A, B is B, C is C, F is F. Whether you have F with Aetna or you have F with Blue Cross, doesn't matter. F is F. F covers whatever F covers. Yeah. The difference may be the premium. I'm not just picking Aetna and Blue Cross as an example. Aetna's premium may be less than Blue Cross's, right? So Aetna may say, we don't have a lot of people in Plan F. We want to get more people in Plan F, so we'll have our cost be $150. I'm just picking up, right? Blue Cross, on the other hand, might say, we've got enough people. We really don't want a lot more people. We'll keep ours at 180. Okay, I'm just picking numbers. I'm not trying to say that's what those are, right? So the companies can decide how they want to price it.
And then the companies, you have to go to their network doctors, is that it?
If it's the question was, you have to go to the network doctor. The answer is no, if it is traditional Medicare. If it's the Medicare Advantage, then the answer is yes.
You're talking about Aetna, Blue Cross, so then you go
Right,
to
those are
Aetna
just the
doctor.
insurance companies, so it has to do with what with the Medicare has to do with. Yes.
Yeah, you know, just like you said, man, I had Blue Cross and Blue Shield. Get the drug, okay, I had it for the long. And now this year I went to Aetna, and I got tier 1 and tier 2 health. I'm facing the medical insurance.
Yeah, I mean, the comment was that, you know, one insurance company charged more than the other for it. Think of it, if you have car insurance, you know, State Farm might charge you more than Allstate, just picking two companies. It could be, well, they could charge you more than State Farm, right? So the companies, the coverage is what's important. So as long as the coverage is the same, then it may not matter as to who you use, right? So the Medicare Advantage is basically an HMO plan. That's what it is, right? I mean, it's an HMO, could be a PPO, right? It's gonna be more restrictive, so you're only gonna be able to see their doctors that they have for it, right? It's not gonna let you, if you wanna go to Christ Hospital and little company is in there, you say, well, my doctor's at Christ. Well, no, you can't go there anymore. Now you gotta go over to little company. I'm just picking two options, right? So it could be good. Medicare Advantage plans can work well in like a major metropolitan area, like Chicago or that for it. They may not work well if you're in a rural area. I don't know Springfield, but I don't know hospitals. You may be more restricted in Springfield than you would be potentially in Chicago. And again, if you need to see a specialist, you have to go, kind of, if you've ever had an HMO, you kind of go in through the gatekeeper to say that you get to go see that specialist. Not saying good or bad, it's just the way that those programs work. But that's why, that's why you're seeing that cost significantly lower. But remember, there's always a difference between price and cost. Just because the price of the premium may be lower, doesn't mean the overall cost, after you take into account co-pays and that, might not be higher, right? There's a difference between price and cost. The price per on a monthly basis could be less. It is at this point in time. But the total cost of it versus, let's say, a different plan could be more. Right? It's kind of like when you buy a car, they say cost of ownership, right? It's not just what you paid to buy the car, it's the maintenance, it's the reliability of the vehicle, it's all the other things that go along with it, right? That becomes the cost of it, not necessarily the price. The price could be more, but when you take all these other factors into event, the actual cost could be less, right? So there's a difference between price and cost. Any questions so far?
So,
Yes.
if this is a mandatory monthly cost, can you write it off on your taxes?
No. The question is, can you write this mandatory monthly cost? I should rephrase that. Potentially. If all of your medical expenses are more than 10% of your adjusted gross income, then you may be able to take some of these expenses off. But for most people, the answer is going to be no. Okay? Because think about it, if you're paying that expense and you're not paying taxes, then they kind of, you're caught in the circle, right? Couple other points. First, big change with the new tax law. For any of you who have either grandchildren or children that may be wanting to go to a private school with their K through 12, essentially, there's been a change in the tax law with regard to 529 accounts. So 529 accounts typically were used to be able to fund post-secondary education. They can now be used to fund K through 12 education for it. There is a limit of $10,000 for it. But it could be a way for, if they want to do that, to be able to set up, we can have more of a conversation about it. In addition, the gifting rules have increased as well. So it used to be $14,000 a year, now it's $15,000 for 2018, right? So now you can give up to $15,000 per person per year for that for it. So that's one of the changes that happened with it. Also, there has been a change with the senior freeze. So those of you who are over 65 in that for it, they have increased the senior freeze number. It's the first time, I think, in about 8 years that I've seen the increase on it. It's now $65,000 of income in that for it. Okay, starting with the this year, so 2017 taxes, right? Those, if you haven't qualified in the past, you may qualify now. So it could be advisable for you to go and get the form and send it in and that for it. It was just a recent change, and I just saw they just came out with the form because I was working with last year's number, and it was 55 last year, and it's 65 this year for it. So just something for you to just kind of be aware of at that point for it. One other point, if you do have a home equity line of credit or a home equity loan, effective January 1st, the interest on those loans is no longer tax deductible. Doesn't mean that they might not be still good loans to have and that for it, but if you have one and you're potentially considering refinancing or something, regular loans are considered, and the interest from those is considered deductible. So it could make sense in some cases with which potentially to refinance your home equity loan into a traditional loan, so to speak, so you're able to take get the tax deduction of the interest on it. Not saying that they're not still good loans in that for it, they tend to still be lower than credit cards and things of that nature in that for it. But one of the other key features was always the ability to, with which to be able to take that tax deduction accordingly for it. So those are just some key things that have happened with that for the tax roll. Everybody familiar with the Atlanta Falcons? So the Atlanta Falcons play in the Mercedes-Benz Dome, all right? When they built the dome, had to finish this, I think was last year was the first year in there for it. Arthur Blank, the chairman in that owns the company, owns the team in that for it, they cut their concessions by 50%. All right, sound familiar? Like something just happened January 1st? Okay, they cut their costs or their selling prices of goods by 50%. When they did that, do you think that they generated more sales or less? So they actually had a sales increase. Sound like anything that just happened January 1st? Right? So they actually had an increase. They announced that fans spent more in the inaugural season inside Mercedes-Benz Stadium than they did in the Georgia Dome. So if cutting costs and cutting prices for people can increase sales at a sporting event, what do you think that can happen with taxes? Proven fact, you lower taxes, you raise revenue, right? A couple other things to consider here. The sales of existing homes in the United States in 2017 was roughly 246,000. That was down, and that was in December. That was down from the peak in June of roughly 263. So you're seeing basically home prices kind of stabilize out there for it, is what this is basically saying for us. Trade war, basically there are two South Korean companies that will result in a 20% tariff in the first year of 1.2 million washing machines that are imported. Both companies are now considering building plants in the United States to avoid the tariffs in that point. And we think we had learned our lesson in 2008. Total outstanding credit card debt of Americans reached 1.023 trillion in November of 2017. That's a record high. The previous high was 1.021 trillion in April of 2008. So 10 years later, we're basically back at the same point that we were, right? Not good or bad, just kind of where the numbers are at for it. So one other point. Today, or this month, actually is the 15th anniversary of having these breakfasts. We couldn't have the breakfast without support from people like Doug, and especially with support from people like yourselves. Many of you may have been here at the first one. Some faces that were, right? I'll never forget that day because that night before we had like 8 inches of snow, and I said, well, I've got to go in case somebody does actually show up. I mean, in case somebody decides to come, right? And we actually ended up for that first meeting, they had about 12 people here. So I'm the brilliant person I am as a gee, if I get 12 people in a snowstorm, breakfast must be a pretty good idea. So I appreciate everybody's support in that over the years in that for it. We look forward to continuing to do these for you. Hopefully you find them informative. That's the whole reason to do these. These are really for your benefit, to try and get information out there. It's unbiased, right? I mean, it's not the television news telling you, it's trying to get you the good information that you need to make decisions, right? We need to make good decisions with the assets that we have, no matter what it's for, whether it's to generate income, whether it's to protect our assets, whether it's to leave a legacy, whatever it might be. Everybody's situation is a little bit different. We just need to make sure that you have the best information so that when you go to make that decision, you have the best information to make the decision with. Okay. So I want to thank everybody for coming today and for your support over the last 15 years. And we'll look forward to seeing you next month.